Does anyone else feel like we're just pretending like we know a thing or two about what we're doing, but actually we're just figuring it out as we go? Yeah, I feel like that all the time. So let me pretend like I know a thing or two about lettering and give you my very minuscule experience that I learned along the way. Let's go. I should probably bring you with me. First thing, materials. And I want to start off by talking about paper. There is a huge difference between smooth paper and bumpy paper. In my opinion, I think it's important for beginners to start off with smooth paper. Textured paper actually has bumps in it, so it could be really frustrating and daunting for anyone who is new to lettering. Even if I try to go really slow and practice a lot, you can see here that I have bumps in my lettering. This is a little bit sped up, but I promise I went as slow as possible. Here's a close-up of my lettering on textured paper, and then here's a close-up of my lettering on the smooth paper. Another important note to remember is the more textured your paper is, the quicker your pens and markers will fray and split, and you definitely don't want that. This marker isn't really that split, but that's because I tend to take care of my pens, so this is all I had to show you guys, sorry. I didn't have a lot of money to spend when I started, so I just practiced on printer paper. It's perfect because it doesn't have a lot of texture. But you can also just purchase a marker pad or any other notebook that has smooth paper. Even a $3 bullet journal from any art and supply store works. Here's a close-up shot of me practicing on printer paper versus the $3 notebook that I literally got from Michaels. I personally like the $3 notebook better. I felt like it was a lot smoother, but the choice is up to you. This isn't really something to stress over. Just grab whatever you have and let's get started. Next up, the fun part, pens and markers. I would recommend the ones that I started off using when I was first lettering because different pens are capable of making different lettering styles. First up, Tombow Dual Brush Pen, or its more loved younger sister, the Artist Loft Dual Brush Pen. Well, more loved if I was the parent. Next, the Tombow Fudenosuke Hard Tip and the Tombow Fude Soft Tip. You can also get them in colors for all my wild ones out there. There's also the Crayola Fine Tips for anyone who wants to get a little nostalgic, and then the Crayola Super Tips. Because let's face it, we all want a little bit of chonk in our life. Alright, not sure what that meant, but let's just move on. And last, the Sakura Pigma Fine Liners. Or any fine liner. The Sakura ones are my favorite though.
Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Been trying to get all of you all night. We haven't talked in months.
Now that we got that out of the way, let's get into the two strokes. And a third one. We have the upstroke, the downstroke, and the connector stroke. The most important thing you want to remember here is that when you create the upstroke, you want the least amount of pressure, and then when you're about to make the downstroke, you want to increase your pressure slowly. Wherever you put the most amount of pressure, that will be your thickest point. The connector stroke usually will have the exact same pressure as the upstroke, and that's why most people just categorize it with the upstroke. But I like adding in that third stroke because I do like to do super elongated lettering sometimes, and the pressure could almost be non-existent in the connector stroke. So now, depending on the lettering style and the letter you are focusing on, the thickest point will vary. For example, for the letter B here, the thickest point is at the base of the downstroke. When you get to the round curve though, the thickest point becomes around the middle. And then for the two L's that I'm about to draw here, the thickest point is at the base on both of them for both lettering styles. For the A that I'm about to write here, the thickest stroke for the rounded part is in the middle, but then for the downstroke, it's at the top. Now, if I switch my pen to the Tombow Dual Brush Pen and change up the pressure a little bit, you will see that the thickest point becomes at the top of each curve. Now that we understand the basic principles of the strokes and the pressure versus thickness situation, we can connect all three together. A helpful tip is to pick up your pen after each stroke. I even pick up my pen after the downstroke instead of following through right into the connector stroke. I do like breaking each stroke into its own segment because it just helps with stabilizing the pressure, and it helps with the consistency and momentum of each stroke. Now that we got all that covered, we can start doing practice drills of the upstrokes and the downstrokes, changing up the way we hold our pen and the angles of the strokes, and then once you get a basic feel of the strokes ingrained in your muscle memory, you can begin to start connecting the letters. But before we do that, let's get into faux calligraphy. I I think faux calligraphy helps with getting a better understanding of the variations in stroke thickness. It's kind of like if you were to add a drop shadow to the right of each stroke in your letters, but then you would just add an outline parallel to the right of the stroke that you had already made. I am using a Sakura Pigma fine liner to do this, however you can use whatever pen or fine liner you have laying around. I would actually start by practicing creating the drop shadow first in a light color, and then outline the drop shadow itself. After you start getting a feel for it, you could go ahead and start practicing without the drop shadow and just go straight in for the line. So you can leave it like this, or you can fill it in with black or any color you want depending on the style that you're going for. To fill these in, I'm using the Sakura Professionals Pigma brush pen. These brush pens are literally my go-tos for whenever I need to fill something in black. I do think that faux calligraphy gives a different aesthetic vibe than normal calligraphy. As you can see here, I am now using a Tombow dual brush pen, but it does help to practice it just so your brain can become more accustomed to where the thick and thin strokes go naturally. Alright, so we got the basic foundation down, so let's actually start using our brush pens and see the different strokes each pen can make. The thicker brush pens like the dual brush pens are best used for bigger lettering styles, but I personally think they are harder to control when it comes to precision because they do have a looser tip. I do think that the Artist Loft brush pens are better in the control department because the tip is firmer than the Tombow dual brush pens, but either way, I think these are great if you want to letter big and bold and create designs instead of the thicker parts of the strokes. The Crayola Super Tips are great as well because they are cheap and you really get to practice your pressure sensitivity because there is no way to bend the tip of the marker, only to press down to create the thin to thick variation in the strokes. Now my absolutely favorite brush pens to letter with would be the Tombow Fude brush pens. If you are into the minimal lettering styles, you know, the styles that have that thin, elongated stretch look, then these are literally the perfect brush pens to use. They are easy to control because of their firm plastic nib, and they can create the thinnest lines because of how tiny their tips are. The hard Fude brush pen has more firmness than the soft tip, which gives you even greater precision and even thinner lines. But both have their place, you know, depending on how thick you want your strokes to be. They also have these in colors, which come with the hard plastic nib, so these are great if you want to add some color other than black in your minimal lettering style. And finally, you can also use any fine liner, pen, or pencil to do calligraphy too. This will require using the same skill you learned with the Crayola Super Tips, the pressure sensitivity, but with a little bit of practice, you can easily learn how to do it. Here is an example of lettering with the Sakura Fine Liners, Papermate Gel Pen, and the Pentel Graph Gear Pencil. I have also created the swatch sheet of all the pens I just used. You are welcome to screenshot this as a reference. These are literally my go-to pens every time I want to letter anything. And now let's figure out your lettering style. One thing I would recommend doing before diving straight into creating your style is grabbing the lettering styles you feel most drawn to from Pinterest or Instagram and trying to mimic them. This is the same idea as students replicating art from their masters to get a better understanding of the techniques they used. As you gain the skills, you will also gain the perspective of which styles you like best, which then will help you feel more confident and joyful during the process of individualizing your lettering rather than feeling the guilt of not being unique enough right from the get-go. I would do this with any new lettering style you're trying to learn or any art form that you're not really familiar with. So now that we got that out of the way, let's get into the lettering sheets. Okay, so when I first started to learn to letter and do calligraphy, I didn't really trace anyone's practice sheets or use anyone's lettering guides because I didn't even know something like that existed. But that does not mean that can't be helpful to you. Personally, I do feel like they kind of restrict me, especially when I want to get really bouncy with my letters. And then I just feel like I'm in 3rd grade and then people are going to judge me or I'll get in trouble if I go out of the lines or something. You know, that's not a good feeling. But it can just be a great way to start if you feel really scared and can't figure it out on your own, and if you don't really care about the bounce right now. So you could create your own lettering sheets using just fine liner or pens like I have done right here on screen. I just used a light gray Tombow dual brush pen to create the low opacity look so I can trace over it with a darker brush pen. Or I have created some printable lettering guides which are available in my Patreon if it's something you're interested in, and the link for that will be down below. So I may not have used anyone's lettering guides in the beginning, but one thing I did do was practice by lettering in pencil first, and then I would go over it in ink. It just felt less scary and dramatic, and that way I didn't have to focus on the lettering curves and the pressure sensitivity at the same time. I only needed to focus on getting my pressure right because I had already figured out the curves by drawing it ahead in pencil. I still use this method today, and no, it is not cheating. It's more like being overly prepared, but hey, whatever works, right? The pencil I am using is the Pentel Graph Gear 500. For the first lettering style, I used the Tombow Fudanowski hard tip, and then for the second one, I used a Tombow dual brush pen number 969. And now for the bounce, space, and angle levels. To To get a better understanding of what I mean, let's take a look at this nice graph I drew on Procreate. As you can see here, there will be 3 main levels where your lettering will go. We have the X height, the ascender height, and then the descender height. All the vowels will stay in the X height row like A, E, I, O, U, and other letters like M and N too. Letters like H and K will extend into ascending height, and then letters like J, G, and Y will extend under descending height. And then depending on the level of your bounce, your lettering will either stay within the outer 2 lines or go over them. In my opinion, starting with a no bounce level is good if you are a beginner. You would only have to focus on the pressure and the curves, and the practice sheets will actually be really helpful for you. And then when you start feeling comfortable with your strokes, you can start getting really bouncy with your lettering. As you practice, you will get better at getting the bounce right and knowing where to extend the curves. You want to focus on making sure the overall composition of the word looks balanced. Sometimes this could look like descending and ascending every stroke, or it could be every 2 strokes. Practicing by mimicking your favorite calligraphy styles will actually help with figuring out how to get this right. Now let's talk about the space levels. The spacing of your lettering all depends on how you letter your connector stroke. By elongating the connector stroke, you can make your spacing really far out, or you can shorten your connector stroke and make the spacing between each letter very minimal. And then last, let's talk about the angles. The most important factor when lettering with an angle is your wrist placement. By slightly changing up the direction of your wrist, you can give your lettering a nice angle to it, or have your lettering be straight and vertical, and well, basically anything in between. Just make sure that the angle degree is consistent in all your letters. Now you can start playing around with all the levels and techniques we've learned together to create different lettering styles. I love just having fun with it and practicing over and over and over again just to see what I can come up with, because honestly the possibilities are literally endless. I have mentioned this before in one of my previous videos that whenever I would get anxiety or have a lot of thoughts, my hand will start tracing words in the air or on my leg, and I would just feel annoyed because I would start doing it completely unaware of the fact that I was even doing it to begin with. It's like as if my body was just moving on its own without me really wanting it to move. But when I got into calligraphy and lettering, this helped manage that and my anxiety a little bit, because I started to repeat the same shapes over and over again, but instead it was on paper with full awareness. It just kind of felt therapeutic, and I was learning something new at the same time. So honestly, I'm just really grateful that I even have calligraphy and lettering in my life. Now for some final tips, my little ones. First, practice lettering slow and fast, and then switch between the 2 speeds. Practicing slow allows you to really hone in on those precision skills, and practicing fast allows you to hone in on those muscle memory skills. But of course, when you are lettering for real, like in your bullet journal or anywhere that's not just practice, I definitely expect you to go slow. I go so slow and write my lettering in pencil first because I'm just a huge perfectionist. But when you're practicing, you can do whatever you want, so I just think switching between the 2 speeds really just helps with the learning process. Second tip, watching other creators do calligraphy and lettering in real time. There are so many creators on the internet that share their lettering process. Just watching them over and over and studying how they do it can really help. I still remember the time I was watching this one YouTuber doing lettering, and I finally understood where the bounce went. It's not something you can really explain, but with a bunch of practice, it's something you will eventually intuitively get. Third, take a break. Draw something else, go make a cup of coffee or tea, water your plants, take a nap, and just come back to it later feeling refreshed. Sometimes when you do the same thing over and over again, like practicing or studying, you get stuck, frustrated, and overwhelmed. Taking a little break allows your nervous system to relax, which then allows you to come back to your lettering with a fresh mindset while still retaining the skills you gained from the last practice session. And in my opinion, that's a win-win. And finally, don't give up, because I know if I can do it, you can do it too. Okay, maybe that intro was a little cheesy, but hey, I'm trying, okay? Give me some slack. So back to my point, I sucked. I sucked really, really bad at lettering in the beginning. So you are just as capable as anyone else, whether you want to fulfill your lettering dreams or anything else you want to do in life. You can do it. I believe in you, little by little, one step at a time. That is all for today. I love you guys very much, and until next time, bye! Why do I keep forgetting to turn this off? Just kidding, I'm not. It's just for dramatic effect. All right, bye for real this time.